Part 27 of finding John's truthful words. And I'm starting at chapter 18:1 because that was the end of the text here when I last edited. And you can see that the words are got truthful enough to keep. But the story is going to say, after Jesus said these words, he went with his disciples to petition YHVH. So this is speaking about where the betrayal is going to happen. And it says, over the ravine of whatever, where there the garden to which he himself entered with his disciples. This is new news here, and this is absolutely wrong, because over the ravine, if I take the land of by Jerusalem and slice it this way, so we're looking at the sky here and the ground down here, we know that Jerusalem is here, and Jesus had to ascend, so we have him ascending into Jerusalem. But we also had him coming into Jerusalem through Bethpage or Bethany, I can't remember which ones, but they had to pass this, went by the mount with olive trees, okay? So now that this road is here, they wouldn't have went to the very peak. They would have took the like a little dip between the mount. And if I turn it now sideways to say, here's the road that's going to come down, the mount is very long. I think it's like a quarter of a mile, but on top of it, because it's a mount with olive trees. But we got to remember, there's also these little hills that are on here. Because if you know the story, you know that the story says that he took the disciples to the mount with olive trees, and then he went a little way from them, or no, then he went and took 3 of them up on a hill. So now, is this actually saying what this text is saying, over the ravine of whatever to a garden? They weren't garden. It was olive trees, and they can grow for hundreds of years. Well, maybe just 100 to 125 years, I think, is what the lifespan of a olive tree is. Some longer maybe, but the object is this whole mount would have had these trees, so there's no garden, okay? And this is where his disciples would go when they'd leave Jerusalem. They would either stay there the night, or there was other places they went for the night. But this is why it is said that Judas knew this place, okay? Who was betraying him knew this place. We don't need to know this. We know who Judas is. Jesus had often met there with his disciples. No, his disciples were around him at all times through Jerusalem. So that is not truth. There's no other text out of any of the books saying that they weren't with him at any time. Now, he sent a couple of them away to the end, so they could prepare for the next day of the day that they would prepare the ram, and then at twilight eat it on the first day of the first year. So we're out talking summer solstice here, which is the easiest to, everybody would have known that event, to be able to say what day is always the first of the year. But Judas and our high, boy, this is so chopped, because I was going to talk about where they're petitioning. You have to have him petitioning, telling, example, Peter, you should petition because you're going to be denying him. And Jesus, and if you know the text, know how everything is, there are words that Jesus said that Peter, Satan wants you because you're going to deny me. Because anyone who denies Jesus, it does not have the full right to enter into heaven. So this is why Jesus says Satan wants you, so you should be petitioning our Creator that your act of whatever you're going to do is lesser than what I know it is. So you're supposed to petition wisely, to ask. Petition means to ask our Creator. A prayer is to talk one-on-one with our Creator. But he knew this place. This doesn't matter. Judas and our tribe's priests and Pharisees. And Jesus teaches us a Pharisee is loves to sit in Moses' seat, which makes them judges. But the priests have officers as well as the judges had officers. When you look at why did the judges have officers and why the priests have officers, it was to show them that they had the authority over the people. Example, the refuge cities had a place where they would judge the one who is either accidentally killed someone or who has killed someone, and he's trying to tell his side of the story before he is killed by the person's family relation has the right to kill that person. They seek out the refuge cities. So in these refuge cities, since they've been there in the promised land, always had these judges with officers there to control the judgment of, or they needed some way as the power to control the people and whatever. So they would have had officers. The priests would have had their own officers as well. They were of a higher authority, so they had to have officers. Well, they came there with torches and weapons. I left out the word lanterns because this is a mob and not a get together. Okay. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things, when they coming upon him, went forth and asked him. So Jesus is, Jesus, the other stories that when you combine them has Jesus coming down from the Mount Olives, okay? He's come down the small hill with the 3 disciples, and then now with the other um, 8, they're now going to come down from that mount. And I don't know why, except for that Jesus knew what was going to happen, that Judas met them as they were coming down this area. Maybe they were coming down to a more grassy area that they could have laid down and slept. But the object is they were coming down this area. Now, the story is going to go forward and tell us more, but I just want to put it into your mind that Jesus said this is the hour of their power when he's being betrayed, which means it has to be 5 o'clock a.m. in our time. So we know that this is the time that the text, Jesus is telling us in the text, when he was betrayed and arrested. But he is coming down this Mount of Olives, and then coming into Jerusalem, and then going to the high priest courtyard. This time that it takes to get there is going to have some play on understanding the text being edited below. I will mention it when I get there, more about it. Jesus, no, he went up to them. We don't have Jesus going up to them. They approached him with Judas, and he asked them, "Whom do you seek?" Well, Jesus already knowing this, so that's a dumb question, but the object is that I got to put the text in here. This most likely will be gone from the text later when it's combined. And they answered Jesus, but they knew who they were coming after, and they knew who he was because they had witnessed him teaching by the gate for our Creator's house for, I think, 6 days at least before, then maybe 7, maybe even 8 days before he was actually, his body died on the cross. And he said, "I am he," and Judas betrayed him. Well, of all the stories about betraying, that's the big news here. Judas, who was betraying him, was standing with them. Well, I had to make it that he betrayed him right then instead of he was, because the story doesn't have this, okay? For the simple fact that we have to have him betrayed so they can arrest him. As you see, these verses here are going to be thrown out, so let's take a look at them. When therefore he said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. I don't think so, okay? I just don't think that Jesus would speak and all of a sudden they fell to the ground with their torches and their weapons, and then they're kind of not run away. This is just false statement here. And then Jesus asked me to say, he wouldn't re-ask them the question. They already told him. Why the repeating? Jesus told him that I am he. If therefore you seek me, let these go their way. That's not truthful either, because our Creator had prophesied how his disciples were going to scatter from him, and Jesus knew this, so he would not be asking them to help deny our Creator's prophecy, so that the words might be fulfilled. And what words are these? And these are the words, okay, it's the words that Jesus spake of them who thou hast given me. I lost not one. That's not true either. Jesus's proverbs tell us that those that enter into his kingdom in heaven, not one will be lost. You can always be lost on earth and not enter into heaven. So these things would have been absolutely lying. Now the text has, let's see, has the word Simon here and the word Peter here. Now, this is to actually make up a new disciple. And then there's other text that says Jesus called Peter Simon. But all that's not true. They all had just one name. But I'm going to use Simon here because him having his sword struck at the high priest's officer. Now, this is like I was saying, Judas had to betray him, and then the officers were coming to arrest him. So this is the act that Simon, having his sword, struck at the high priest's officers and cut him. Now, the text I'm getting rid of is to cut off his right ear, and we don't need to know this because he's never a slave, and we don't need to know his name. But the object is the really weird part is that Simon was so good with his sword that he could strike him on just right on the face, on the side of the head, to cut off his ear. And I know the ear is inset onto my head, so he was really particular that he just got that just right. And then he didn't hit the shoulder, that he stopped the force that was used to cut the. See how ridiculous that is sounding? Anyways, I got rid of this, cut off his right ear. To strike the word struck at means to kill, okay? So he struck at the high priest officer and cut him. Now, this, when it says cut him and not stabbed him, now the word struck, having a sword, um, how do I want to say he did a sideways, like he pulled it out and he went after him this way, or left-handed, he goes like this, depending on which side he's standing on Jesus when this is happening. He cut him on the arm is what I'm going to be saying. So does the word struck at the officer? Having a sword drew it to strike. To strike or struck. I'm going to get rid of the word ear in all this. He struck it. He went to strike to kill him. Yes, when he pulled out, he went to having a sword. He drew it and then struck at him. This is going to, now we just have the attempt of him to kill the officer. Okay. Yeah, because I can't get the word cut on his arm from the word struck. Struck is to kill, and that's what you would do to defend your king. Okay. So the thing here is if there's one who's zealous of any of it is Simon. Okay. Now he drew now this when it says having a sword, did they all have a sword? Most likely. They were walking around in some bad places from time to time. So, and to have 12 guys walking around with swords, they wouldn't have been robbed or stuff like that. So, having a sword, drew it and struck at the high priest's officer. I think I got to put that in there. Okay, but Jesus said, Simon, he's not changing his name to Peter all of a sudden. Simon, put your sword into its sheath. Now, why I'm using Simon is because Peter, we know, is going to go into the courtyard, and they would have recognized him automatically, so he couldn't have denied him. So it has to be two different people here. So I'm using Simon, and now we have one of the disciples, and now we have the story of the other disciple. Their officers arrested Jesus. Yeah, I guess I should put the word then. And actually, the word then needs to be moved down here because the word so is often used as the word then. So I'm not really adding my own word here, but I'll say I am. But those of you who do check Elvis, you'll find that you'll be able to say there's many words that I did replace, and then there's not as many as I'm just changing the word. to another word that they would have been used. So I better add it here. Then their officers arrested Jesus and led him away to, okay, this verse here. Having to get rid of this is why I needed to add this. This was the first high priest, but however the text is talking about him as the first high priest, it doesn't make any sense here. Let me pull up these verses and show you. Here you can see Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Cyprus. Now this, we have no true story or true text that blatantly tells us how the next high priest is chosen. We do know that at the age of 50, they have to leave the service. And this guy here, the text tells us that he was the high priest when Jesus was born, okay? And then Cephas took over. Now, the high priest would have 2 attendants, and they would have been from that tribe's area. Now, saying that, it's kind of like you have to understand that when they went into the promised land, our Creator told them their cities have to, each tribe's area has to have a city known as a refuge city. And this is where those that had killed somebody by accident or on purpose could flee to be heard by them, the judges and the Levites, these judges and the lawyers. So a lot of the lawyers and judges are Levites, so are the scribes, but they would have had these 12 cities, and after what I'm saying is they had judges there, okay? And what I'm saying, that the high priest in Jerusalem has 2 attendants, they would have probably been as a group from one of those cities. How'd they get to the next tribe to have this spread around to them? Now, this is talking about the corruption of time, so I don't see this as them following all the rules, but the object is that everyone knew that you just can't have the father to son or father to the son-in-law replace him, because this group would have been gone because he had turned 50 and had to leave. And the attendants wouldn't have been 50, but they would have left with him because they were a group, just as the other priests were, and they would turn 50. Their group would go as well. So how does this actually justify how this verse even exists? To me, it makes no sense, because it would have been the importance of the high priest when he left from serving in the house for our Creator. At the time of Joshua, and then there's 300 years that's kind of missing, there are judges. These men become the judge over the nation Israel. And that's when you pick up Elijah being the last judge, or then it was as from the high priest lineage. So at that time, it does have him leaving, and his sons became priests, because they're the ones that lost the chest with that carried the commandments in when they carried it. So now that I have that in mind, that they replaced the high priest, I have to think about that because it wouldn't have been father-in-law here. It would have been his son. His son would have come in and been one of his attendants. His sons would have been attendants for him. Anyways, this is not making any sense. But I don't know how many times I've actually had to reason out how the high priests, when they left, have to do now. Remember, Eli's sons stayed around as priests or as a priest. I'll have to revisit that story because it's now confusing in my head. I have understanding that he is not part of the tent for meeting with our Creator. He's actually trying to judge. Although now I'm thinking that story through, I better just stop so I can continue here and just tell you that this verse here doesn't make any sense. And they went to Caiaphas's courtyard. Now, okay, they have the word court down here, so that's why I'm using to add the word to say, and then add it up here as courtyard. Who was high priest? It says that year, and it should have been those years. They didn't have a high priest every year. We have that knowledge from the text before that this guy here was the high priest, and then this was the high priest in Jesus' lifetime. And he is the one who advised the Jews. Well, we know that if we had the correct story going through here, and it is expedient of one male to die on behalf of the people. This is not true. They've got to release one who was to be crucified from their people to be released. Okay. I don't know how this practice got around, but the object is they were to release one. And then what we know is that the high priest had his group out in front of Pontius and demanding that Jesus still be crucified, even though that they wanted Barnabas to be released. So this is absolutely false. And Peter followed them, and so did another disciple that he known to the high priest. Well, this has to be Judas. So Peter followed them because they had Jesus, so it's not that he followed Jesus, but Peter followed them as they entered into the courtyard for the high priest. So, Judas, I'm thinking that if I put Judas's name in here, from the other stories we already know he's there, but we're talking about how he came through into the gate to be there. And I don't want to just throw them words out and not have, not try to keep every truthful word here. Peter was standing outside the door, so Judas, well, if they would have known who Peter was, so why did he go? And it's not a doorkeeper; it would have been a gatekeeper. So this here verse is not truth because they would have known who Peter was. He would have been a friend of Judas, and Peter really wouldn't have allowed that. So we know that that's just made up or very poor accounting of what was going on. So the other, you say, Peter followed them, as did Judas, as they entered into it. Would have to say, as did Judas, followed them, as did Judas. As did Judas, when they entered into the court. Then the officers arrested Jesus and led him away to Caiaphas' courtyard. Peter followed them, as did Jesus, or as did Judas, when they hugged them. I do forget to. Did I just add the word entered? I gotta back up here. Yeah, the word entered, and I didn't have it down here. Well, let me. Yeah, because over here, I should have just checked here. And they entered with Jesus into the court of high priest. So, what I need to do is go forward now. Yeah, when they entered. Let me get this. This is all 11. When they entered, and I don't need this word here. Okay. As did Jesus, as did Judas, when they entered the courtyard for the high priest. Okay. Got through that. Okay, now we have them entering in the courtyard, which is very good. And making sense at the same time. So, okay, now I have here a slave girl. Well, therefore, who kept the gate or kept the door. No, okay. You wouldn't have a slave girl at the gate entrance to open that up to allow them back and forth. They were a mob. They wouldn't go get some girl to be the guard of the gate when they're doing this. So that's obviously wrong. So we have to have an officer who guarded the gate. And the door, you don't have a door. A door is to a house or a home. We don't want to confuse this to going into the gate courtyard. Keep that word as gate, as the word gate would be to enter our Creator's courtyard. So now we have one word meaning one thing here. So the officer who guarded the gate said to Peter, "Are you not one of this male's disciples?" And he told him, "I am not one of his." Now I've added one of his, meaning that he had to deny him specifically with the word his. Okay. I am not with Jesus. They could have said, but here, this officer would have had to been there, or maybe he wasn't there at the time, but he had witnessed Jesus before with the high priest going to him, because Jesus taught at the gate for of the Creator's house for 7-8 days before his body died on the cross. So okay, it's reasonable that he would have asked him if he was an officer that had witnessed him when Jesus was teaching. Not that this guy would have been. Now, this could have been the assistant. I'm trying to think of any other person might be able to do this. I have to think about that later. I guess when the story's all put together, maybe some of this goes together and maybe it doesn't. I'm thinking this is going to be a keeper. It's just that, no, is this officer an officer? For example, my little mind just went crazy. You have to have guards for the gates to go into the house or to enter the courtyard for our Creator. So we have specifically guards that guard the gate. And then it would be the guard who guarded the gate, because he would have been at the house watching Jesus teach. I think that word is going to be the guard. I think because they would have been pulled in on this deal, some of them. So the guard who guarded the gate said to Peter, I think that's more truthful than an officer. I really do. Guard who's to keep. I'm trying to think who was. Yeah, it's a rarely used word, and it's used maybe 4 times. It means a doorkeeper, which we know that this would be a gatekeeper. So yes, I'm more closer to a guard keeping a watch over the gate for the house, that they would have had to live somewhere there as well. So yeah, I'm really liking that. It's new news to me, but I do learn as I go, especially when I'm correcting these and trying to be reasonably truthful about how could that officer been had this knowledge of Peter. Okay. Um, Now, when I talked about not changing a word of the text, as you can see, like this word here, if someone figures it out like that later after I did, yeah, and you're still not, then you can put a footnote in and say the guard or what's more reasonably possible than what I've done for the editing today. But that would be the only editing that I would kind of allow if it actually was reasoned out, because just like right now, I'm using the word, you had used the word officer, and you've seen how it was making my mind stumble here when I'm trying to put it together in front of you. How did he know who Peter was? And then when I reasoned out, or most likely I was given by our Creator, that knowledge at this time to say there's guards at the gate there, and he would have witnessed them there, so there has to be guard. So that's how um, our Creator helped me out to get the answer here. Now, is there many times in the text that I haven't been as accurate? If you can figure it out and reason it out like what I just did there, I would allow a footnote to and change that word as to why that word is being changed. But that's the only way to actually correct a word if I have actually made another error someplace else. Because it's going to be quite a while before I die, so there's might be 100 changes between now and then. But I'm just saying that when you get to this part and hear my words, that's how this has to be reasoned out to be the logical answer. Okay. As the officers were standing around with torches. Okay. Now it says that they made of coal a fire, and they were cold warming themselves. Now, when I told you about the time of when the resting is on the summer solstice, it's already warm. They don't need a fire to warm themselves. Even though it's 5 o'clock in the morning and they've been walking around and stuff, um, you have to understand that they were the next step in the stories is that they were okay. Yeah, it's actually as our high priest questioned Jesus. Okay, um, these words here, high priest. Here we have to understand that if they were warming themselves by a fire, they wouldn't have all been able to see what was going on. So um, they were standing around with torches. Okay, torches. Because they had them already. So as they were standing around with torches, um, so they could still see in these, as the sun was starting to shine for daylight, you would see that this would be more reasonable instead of being warm, that they were staying around. And then as the high priest started questioning Jesus about his teaching. So here we just have um, not one fire, but torches for everybody to see what was going on. And then Peter stood by one of them, not with them, because he was standing and warming himself. No, that's not summer solstice. even at that time in the morning, it could be, it might not be the 100 degrees, but it might be all in the 90s. So they wouldn't have been needing a fire to warm themselves, is what I'm saying here. So that's the end of this in trying to put the understanding here of the torches and the distance that they had to walk from where they truly arrested Jesus, that was in this fifth, what I call, or what we call today, the 5 a.m. hour. Okay. So did that take, could it possibly been within an hour that they arrested him and brought him here, and this is starting to take place for us to understand also because Jesus said at that hour, so we know it is that hour. I'm telling you what the hour is because a lot of you would not know that word, that knowledge. But the object is that hour is very reasonable for them to do this. Okay, and the torches, if it was that they had them in their hand, they would have been having light around to witness the high priest questioning Jesus. I think that's as true now as it was in that day.